welcome to the regular board meeting of December 18th, 2018. And Merry Christmas. So, to all.
Christmas.
So with that, I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Mr. Kowal?
Here.
Mr. Lilly is here. Mr. Roman?
Here.
Mr. Powell?
Here.
Liz Smith?
Here.
Andrea Voorhees?
Present.
Mr. Ruggles is absent.
At this moment in time, we'll go to item 5, which is public comment. You'll be allowed 3 minutes to state whatever is basically not on the agenda. For the most part, what is on the agenda, we ultimately talk about at some point in time. So if anyone has anything they'd like to say, I'd like you to state what you have to say. You have to state your name for the record, and if you come up to the podium, that would be best, because the microphone will pick you up.
Mr. Supervisor, don't forget the item before that. The item before that.
Which is
Mary Early, E-A-R-L-E-Y, 5925 Pine Ridge Court, and it's in Hidden Pine subdivision. I have 4 things I'd like to address. First of all, the newsletter that came out, I want to thank you for that. It was very informative and greatly appreciated, and we look forward to more. The second thing is about the Grass Lake Road paving. There are the east and the west sides of Ormond Road that both need help. There's many other roads in the township that need help. Some of the roads that come to mind are Mead Lane, England Beach, Lakeview Drive. The ruts in that road would bury my car. I went down it once and that's it. If there are any other funds that you can get for any other road improvements, it would be very appreciated. The next thing is we missed the November meeting, but we watched it on video. Everybody who spoke used the microphone, except the homeowners from the Settlers Point program. They were in the back. It was very difficult to hear them. So I wish you would insist.
Santa's going to bring us a cordless microphone this year.
Oh, that'll be nice. Okay. And the last thing, looking ahead to summer, the Quake on the Lake is going to be reprised under some format. There were previous concerns from Terry Lilly and John Holland regarding following procedures on the permits and the regulations. And I hope that there are no problems and that the township will insist that everything be followed to the letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that I will close the public comment. Looking for approval of the agenda.
Mr. Supervisor, there's a couple of corrections that are on the table today. There's an additional budget amendment that you all should have a copy of. That was mainly due to elections overtime. I'd like to add item, an FYI onto the agenda, item H under new business. I'd say that this, all that will be just a informational thing for the next meeting. And also, you should have a copy on the table of a corrected item 9A, and the corrections are on the back of that page. If you're trying to compare the one you have to the one that's on the table.
Thank you. Yeah, a little detail was missing.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as I have stated.
I have a motion. Looking for approval.
Support.
I have support from Mr. Powell. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next is the consent agenda, a list of bills, revenue expense, check disbursements, budget amendments, zoning board of appeals appointments, which we will discuss after this briefly, planning commission appointments, department reports, police, fire, community development, treasurer's report. Looking for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the addition of the new budget amendment, and also just to acknowledge on the planning commission that in the zoning board of appeals that are all reappointments and nobody new one of the commissions.
Okay, very good, thank you. I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
A motion and support, all in favor?
Under discussion, just for, I know what the discussion is.
No discussion.
No discussion.
None.
But it's, no, this is a compliment to the police and fire department. They do an amazing job here in this township, and the reports indicate it. So
What are you
thank
gonna
you.
learn? No discussion.
Sorry, had to.
You can compliment after we do consent.
Who supported that?
Andrea.
Andrew.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I know what you mean. Just real quickly, the folks that were put back on the Plan Commission were some very good people. Mr. Steve Anderson, Ms. Murray Carlock, and Mr. Anthony Noble. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, Mrs. Ellen Swanson, Mr. David Walls, and Mr. Cliff Sieber. These are all folks that have taken an interest in the township and trying to serve in those capacities, and ones that help us get through the processes. This board gives a lot of credence and weight to what the Planning Commission does, and we do not meddle with them because they are a very, very hard-working group that are trying to move us forward, but move us forward cautiously. So I'd like to welcome those folks back on the board. Moving along to item 7, which would be the minutes, the approval of the minutes, of regular board meeting of November 20th, 2018.
Motion to approve.
Motion, support?
Support.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So have it. Minutes of the approval of the special board meeting of November 28th, 2018, Mr. Roman?
I have 2 corrections to make. On page 2 of 4, fourth paragraph down that starts with, there may be a rate study in the near future. Need to change the word uses to users. So it would read, Treasurer Roman noted that no one makes that deficiency up directly. It's shared by users and connections. And then the next sentence, Supervisor Cowell stated that the rates are adjusted until a rate study is done. That needs to say are not adjusted until a rate study is done.
Good catch, Michael.
Very good. Any other comments on that? Okay. Looking for a motion? Or did you make?
Motion to approve the corrected minutes of November 28th.
Okay. And support?
Support.
I have support. Motion, support. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item is item number 8. We're going to have a public hearing related to the Settlers Point Stormwater Detention System Restoration SAD. What this project is an existing development that has been around since
1991.
1991, thank you. And the basin that they have has become overgrown, and though it was not maintained to the level that it could have been or should have been, it is not doing quite its job. And Mr. Potter, I'll let you elaborate, just give a little quick synopsis for anybody that may not have been involved in the other meetings.
Okay. I'll come up to the phone for these folks. Okay, thank you. Yes, so Settlers Point Stormwater Detention System, as Mr. Supervisor has stated, fallen into a state of disrepair. These folks have approached us to assist them in getting this brought back into a workable condition. They have, per our last meeting, part of the discussion was an engineering escrow, essentially a non-refundable deposit that would be placed. They have come in and given us a check. They were not able to give us $8,000. But they did give us a check for $2,000. Now, for a neighborhood as small as theirs, for them to give us $8,000 would essentially take away their ability to operate their neighborhood during the winter months. So we feel like they've complied with the township's wishes. And what we are asking you to do tonight is to establish the district and to approve the engineering services agreement that I brought forward last month so that we can get going on working on this project for them.
Okay, very good, Mr. Potter. Okay, at this time, I would like to open the public hearing to establish a Settlers Point Stormwater Detention System Restoration SAD. For a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Support.
Support? All right, all in favor to open the public comment, public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now in public comment. If you have an interest or something that you would like to say regarding this particular potential SAD, we would like to hear what you have to say at this time.
Yeah, so my name's John Cole, resident of Settlers Point,
Address,
400
John?
Woods Edge, White Lake. So, I have several questions, and I guess, is somebody from J&A here?
Not this evening, no.
So we don't have anybody that can answer any questions about their estimate?
Mr. Potter can answer
can answer
also.
I'm concerned, so I've been a resident there since 1993. When I bought the house, I was told that in order to have a tree removed, I had to have permission from the board at the time. The board was the developer. They wanted to preserve the natural look of this neighborhood. As I look over this estimate from J&A, I'm looking at 20 trees being removed, 6 inches to 18 inches, 8 trees, 19 inches to 36 inches, 2 trees, 37 inches and larger. I'm looking at stumps being removed, 6 at 6 to 18 inch, 6 at 19 to 36 inch. I'm concerned that this is not a remediation, this is a total clearing. I don't understand why trees have to be removed to fix a detention pond.
Well, I can explain that to you real simple. They weren't supposed to be there from day one, and that was through neglect that those trees came up.
A 30-some inch tree is not through neglect, sir. I'm sorry.
Well, they need to be removed in
Why?
order for that to work
What,
efficiently.
no, I disagree, and I would like to see some proof to that fact. You're making that statement doesn't satisfy me.
The engineers,
How does a tree affect drainage in a detention pond?
Mr. Potter?
Okay, so the tree that you're referring to is a willow tree. And a willow tree can in fact grow to that size.
It's a dead willow tree. So how's that affecting water runoff in detention pond 2?
Even more reason for it to be removed.
No, that's a convenience thing that you're making me pay for that I don't believe I have to pay for.
So what we're doing is restoring the basin to its original design. We
That
have-
tree was originally in there.
We have an as-built drawing. We have, if you go back to the county property gateway, I mean, you can pull up the 1991 aerial and see the original basins, free of trees.
That willow tree didn't just jump up and grow in the last 30 years, sir.
Yep. So we are at this
You're
point.
clearing, you're doing a Lamborghini job when all we asked to do was have the detention pond returned to a workable condition, not a pretty condition, a workable condition. You're doing this because we seem to be willing to spend $150,000 to have this done.
Can I answer this?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, we're not making money on this project. The township is not making money on this
I
project.
understand. Well, you're making 7%, but that's not profit. I understand
7%
that.
pays for our time and,
That's fine.
and our efforts. We are dealing with an engineering project. We have a spec that we have established on the as-built plans that were certified in 1991 for the development. Now, what we're going to do is create a spec.
Can I ask just a second?
No,
Did you
please
approve
let me
that?
listen.
Okay,
Please
go
let
ahead.
me answer.
Yep.
We're going to create a bid spec with that being the standard that this is going to come back to. Now, that's not bringing this up to the current standard. The current standard is much different than the standard from 1991. This is bringing the pond back to the original condition. Now, second, these are estimates. Now, if you were at the last meeting or watched the last meeting,
I did.
we talked about things that we were unable to look at, the condition of the pipework there, you know, when we were out there, there was a flood condition at the site. We were not able to look at a lot of these things. What we're talking about on this is an engineering estimate. These are not quotes. We don't quote this like a cost of a car where you know, we're going to agree on a price and then we're gonna come in there and do this. Now, thirdly, these are our engineers' cost opinions. The final prices on any of this are going to go out to bid, and that's how the township, as a government agency, controls costs. We're not going to go in there and make you guys repair something that isn't broken. If the pipe work is in good condition, it's not gonna be touched. What will be touched are, the trees will be removed, the stumps will be grubbed out, the pond will be brought back to its original volume condition. The SO2 filters will be restored to their original working condition. So that's what the plan is. And then finally, the property will be revegetated and, you know, hopefully.
And this is a woods, right? So we're gonna revegetate a woods with a
Pond is
shaded.
not intended to be a woods.
Well, it's in the woods. It's not?
It is.
Thank you. So when the township approved the original detention ponds, was the willow tree there or not?
As far as I understand, no, the willow tree was not.
Oh, come
Can
on.
I just say one thing? So, are we
Excuse
allowed
me.
to talk? Sorry.
Hold on.
I'll give the floor to them,
Yep,
they're
okay.
neighbors.
When he's finished.
I need the name for you. Stand up and recognize yourself for the record.
My name's Ron Summers. This is Bridget Orzak.
I need addresses for the recorder.
We moved into 8050 High Point Trail last month,
Sorry.
so we're a little bit not up to speed. But I can say, as Mr. Potter had said many times to me personally and at this meeting, that the Oakland County Property Gateway that shows these aerial images, they go back to 1940 and they get a little sporadic, but you can even see in 1940 that said willow tree is there. Ponding water has been there throughout the years. That really hasn't changed too much. I encourage you guys to look at these. I printed them out. And even if you go down to, I don't know, year 2000, where it actually becomes a little bit more clear, because you can imagine satellite images from 1960 and 1940 and such aren't as clear. You'd be hard pressed to say that this was completely cleared at some point, because forests don't just pop up like this in 10 years. So this original state, this detention pond problem, it definitely affects one of the basins on the property. I won't argue that, but the second one, which happens to be pretty much backing up to these woods and is probably more or less most affected, I haven't seen myself any sign of issue. I understand there's overgrowth and it could be cleaned up, but I'm not sure what the issue is there. Because the amount of water that would have to show up would be 3 or 4 feet by 100 feet by 300 feet. It'd be an astronomical amount of water to just show up and have to actually use this SO2 filter. So to his point, I'm not sure that this all needs to be done. Maybe it can be handled in phases, where the first basin that actually is still holding water can be cleared out and restored, because that is a detention basin. It's not supposed to hold water. It's supposed to drain after 48 hours. Is that correct, Mr. Potter?
Correct.
So that indeed is an issue. But this second basin, the one that's going to be cleared out the most and affect how our backyard and our property looks and feels, and for everyone else's enjoyment too in the neighborhood, I'm not really sure what the problem is, to be fair and square.
I would argue, I wouldn't argue that Basin 1 needs work. There's no question that needs work. The soil is up to the top of the overflow. One question I would have is the overflow has an overflow that's supposed to go out to the Wayne County Road or Drain Commission, and if there's standing water in there, one would question why that overflow that's going to a public area isn't functioning.
The overflow
It's
is
a 6 or an
functioning.
8-inch line.
The overflow is functioning. When I visited the site in May, the pond was, detention basin number 1 was full to the overflow level. and pouring in and draining into the Oakland County.
The soil level in one is equal to the top of the 48-inch pipe.
Correct.
Okay, so any water that goes in there is going to go into that big 48-inch pipe. The question is,
Problem.
the 48-inch pipe also has a drain, an emergency drain that runs off of it. If there's water in that 48-inch pipe, then I would have to question why it's not running off to the emergency drain. Why is it standing in that pond?
So the design of the SO2 filter is two parts. There's a controlled inlet along that's covered with usually 3-inch stone, followed by a smaller aggregate stone. Then there's the overflow. There's only one outlet pipe that leaves that structure and goes into the Oakland County drain system.
And that's within the 48-inch, it's about 12 inches down from the top, right?
The 48-inch, I think, are you talking about the standpipe?
Yeah, the standpipe. Yeah.
Correct.
So what you're saying is water was over the top of the 48-inch pipe but not draining away.
No, water was overflowing into the overflow at the top of the standpipe. It was draining. The problem is that is not supposed to be overflowing. With that comes all this debris
Oh yeah, I don't argue.
that's going out and potentially plugging the Oakland County system, which that can't happen.
The Oakland County overflow is an emergency overflow, I understand that. And the standpipe is supposed to be, what, 18 to 24 inches above the grade of the...
I didn't bring the design, they're all different, depends on the design of the basin, the depth of the
But
basin.
let's say that. So the issue to me is clearing and making detention pond number 1 functional. You'd be hard pressed to prove to me that there's anything wrong with detention pond 2.
Well, that itself is the point of the survey. And that's why we don't know what these costs are. Essentially, you're exactly right. And that's why when we have, so the township does not have a revenue source to go out and do repairs on private storm system. So I can't go out there and do engineering at our cost and determine what amount of silt or sedimentation is in these basins. So, we get an engineering estimate. They've gone out and done some preliminary inspection with a surveyor. An engineer has not been out there. Now, so these numbers, again, and I've been over this with your association probably 5 or 6 times now. These numbers are estimates only, preliminary estimates. Along with this, last month, I brought an engineering services proposal for Johnson and Anderson to come out to the site and do the engineering there and correctly assess what the condition of both of these ponds are and what needs to be done to bring them back to the original design that was approved by the township.
Okay, but you served us with notice that detention pond 2 needs to be rebuilt or refurbished based on what?
I don't recall ever serving that notice to you,
Well, the SAD here includes a lot of work on detention pond 2,
correct?
okay? And it sounds like we're gonna have to pay to prove that we've got a problem in detention pond 2, and that should be on the township, because there's nothing wrong with you can't prove that there's anything wrong with detention pond 2.
Okay, so let me put it this way. We have an approved as-built design. We have an approved construction design from the 90s that gave volume calculations per each detention pond that met the township standard at the time. Our engineers reviewed those plans and approved construction. As-built drawings were submitted to us that were certified that that was built to those specs. It's very easy for engineers to go out there and survey that land now and see what the difference there is. That's how.
Did you
how
do
we're
that?
going to operate.
We have to pay to do that. You don't have to prove that we're wrong or that we have a problem. We have to
Spells out
defend.
that this detention system is common element to your subdivision. So This has always been your responsibility to maintain.
And it's fine.
Maintain that.
And I maintain that basin 2 is fine. Prove me wrong. Go hire an attorney or go hire an architect or an engineer to prove us wrong. It shouldn't be our dime that proves that we've got a problem. Because I'll contend all day long there's nothing wrong with that. I'll give you basin 1. Basin 1 needs a lot of work, no question about that. But it just seems like, and going back to your estimate statement, no. Going back to your I estimate a lot of stuff. And I rarely have stuff come in underestimate. Most of the time it comes in overestimate. So for you to sit here and tell me that it's only an estimate and it could come in a lot cheaper doesn't do anything for me.
No, I've made it very clear to your association members, your board members, that we don't know what these costs are going to be. These are only our opinions.
And you're gonna vote to approve a SAD based on this amount, right?
Your board has asked us to approve an SAD.
Well, why would we do that if we don't even know the actual cost of the project? Why would this board
Here,
approve?
Mike, your board.
Whatever, it's, yeah.
Excuse me, one meeting at a time. Mr. Powell.
And I totally understand where you're coming from. The process in order for this board to assist the association is set forth in the state law, Act 188, that allows us to spread costs over public improvements to assist residents. So in this process, we have to hold 3 different meetings. One meeting was held last month, which this board approved the intent to establish a special assessment district. The next step is a step that we then approve the boundaries of those properties that are benefited by the either the road or in this case the detention basin. So what's before us tonight is just strictly an approval of the boundaries of that special assessment district, and that number is only a guidance to everyone saying that this is our best guess because we're not voting on numbers tonight. The last public hearing then will be after the engineers get done with their survey, the analysis as to how much work needs to be done, and potentially even going out for bids so we actually have bids before us before we can approve the actual number. That's why it would be inappropriate for this board to approach the association or you guys as residents without at least some idea as to what it might cost. So therefore, we ask our engineers to come up with an approximate cost just to give everybody a ballpark. Because is it $1 million or is it $10,000? We don't know. So this is the best guess based upon starting with an assumption of how much dirt has to come out, how much vegetation, how much piping, and all that stuff. I'm going to probably assure you that this is worst case scenario because, quite frankly, I believe these are very high. And the concern with not being high is twofold. Number one, if we don't, if the bids come in a great deal higher than what we're proposing here, somebody that wanted the SAD might say, now that's too much, and so therefore we don't want it anymore. And then also, if we only take a part of the project and we only do part of it like you're suggesting, and then we have to reestablish an SAD later, now we have twice the administration costs, twice the attorney fees, and twice the bonding costs that the association has to deal with. So we lump it all together, and then hopefully it gets narrowed down to a project that makes sense. And this board is going to make sure that the project makes sense. I'm a civil engineer, and so I'm going to be very, very careful on how much work we authorize as part of the next public hearing. So your concern is extremely well placed, and I totally understand it. But this discussion really needs to take place at the next public hearing because we'll know the numbers. And quite frankly, you'll know precisely how much this township is looking to assess every single property owner in there by property. And so that would be the appropriate time saying, listen, I think it's too high, we shouldn't do this. That would be the time that we could vote on it. My property has nothing to do with it, and therefore I shouldn't be associated. My amount isn't nearly as much as somebody else's. That's when the number. This meeting tonight is, does your property benefit by that detention basin?
So you're just setting the boundaries?
Just setting a boundary for the basin. That's all we're doing for the public hearing.
Well, then just let me go on record, then the next meeting I'll be back.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You have to stand and be identified.
Sorry. My name is Bridget Orzak. I live at 8050 High Point Trail. Sorry, we just moved in. So I'd like to thank, yes.
If you can go to the podium, because then the microphones will pick you up.
Yeah.
Santa brings us a mic.
I'd like to thank the board and Mr. Potter for repeating some of these things. We're new, so we're coming in at the 11th hour, and unfortunately, we are the ones that are right behind Basin 2, so we're the ones that are most affected. So, as far as you guys saying, thank you for explaining the steps. So, step 3, we're going to be discussing the actual quote, what's going to be happening, and who is approving the actual itemized parts of the quote. So if we say, okay, basin number 1, we all agree, okay, all of us.
Township board, it'll come before the township board in the bidding process. That's how we will do it, and that's what will determine what the actual SAD cost will be.
For the actual pricing, but who's saying, okay, we want tree number 7 to be removed, who,
That'll be determined by the engineers,
so the city engineers.
township engineer.
So the HOA does not have a voice in that.
In order for it to function the way that it was originally designed, okay, the trees, I'm not gonna say because I don't have all the specifics in front of me, there's a very good chance that those trees are an obstacle in the function and design, water absorption, and the fact that they're dropping leaves into there and it's creating more topsoil, and it's a whole series of things. Typically, these basins are void of any trees at all, simply for those reasons. And you're just looking at overgrowth from 1991. So you've got, 20 some odd years of overgrowth in there that, it wasn't maintained. And this is what has to be resolved, because as it continues to grow, the problem will just continue to get worse. And eventually you could have an overflow of the system somewhere down the line, more so than it's had. And there's been issues up and down Williams Lake Road with other areas of that nature that flow into the Oakland County right-of-way drain. So this is just part of trying to put that water in there at a steady pace when it gets up to a high volume, and the rest of the water percolates back down to the ground. But the more vegetation, leaves that fall and all that, that starts to build a layer that slows that percolation process down.
We understand that, I understand that. So we are not going to play ignorant and say that we don't have any maintenance and cleanup to do. There's a lot of years that it was neglected and it absolutely has to be cleaned up. But what we're asking is evidence, again, that Basin 2 is a problem. We keep on hearing, and apologize for my ignorance on this, I'm new. We keep on hearing that we have to return it to its original glory or its original plan, but who's saying that there is actually a problem with it now, how it is? Yes, it should have been designed that way, or that's what the city approved originally 30 years ago, but who's saying that how it is right now isn't a problem? Again, not Basin 1. We have seen that. You can walk down there and you can see that. But Mr. Potter, my question to you is, you said that you actually saw flooding on Basin 1. Did you see any issues at that same date at Basin 2? And what did you see?
I didn't inspect Basin 2 that day. So no, I did not go up into Basin 2. That's a wooded area now. But again, the system is designed in a certain way that met the township standard at the time that was built. And for us to come in now and create an SAD, again, your association has asked us to do this. I've been working with them since May of this year on this project.
Unfortunately, we just moved in a month ago, so thank you for repeating yourself.
I understand that, but again, it's part of the master deed requirement. This is common element, it has to be maintained. Now, our engineers, when we asked them to go out to the site, noted the large number of trees in this area that was supposed to be basin number 2. So, again, until we have the full survey completed, we don't know that much needs to happen there, other than a lot of those trees will probably need to be removed. We do know that much. But that is how we're going to find out exactly what needs to be done. At this point, these are all guesstimates. And until this engineering is completed, we won't know exactly what needs to happen in Basin 2, what needs to happen in Basin 1. I noted in my letter to the association that we were unable to inspect the piping in between the basins. or anywhere else on the property due to flooding at the time. So, you know, that stuff is all going to happen when we send engineers out there to do the survey of the site.
But we're saying that basin number 2 has to be adjusted or, completely, which, your words to Ron last week were completely bulldozed. So for us to say, okay, you guys are only going to remove so many trees somewhere and then you're going to completely bulldoze an area, what reasoning besides that that's how it was originally supposed to be?
Okay, I don't recall ever saying the words completely bulldozed.
I'm sorry, maybe it's you, it's verbatim. He's going to kill me later.
That doesn't sound like something I would say. No, we will be denuding the area of the basin.
But
and-
to how many feet and all of that, understand that needs to be, you guys are getting
Well,
that
like I
spec'd
said,
out.
we have an original as-built so we have the exact numbers of how that was originally built. And our intention is to bring it back to that because that's the only spec we have of comparison.
So it's based on an engineering plan that was approved and was implemented, and now they're trying to go back to that original standard because that's how the system was designed to perform.
So it was originally designed that way 30 years ago. Are we not grandfathered in some capacity because it has been this way and we haven't had a
It
problem
just
in
hasn't been
Basin 2?
maintained.
No, it hasn't been maintained and your master deed spells out your maintenance responsibilities.
If
of
I
an
if I can
association.
pipe in, I'm sorry. Just for the sake of the new people who weren't here at the last meeting when it was explained. So when a condominium development or homeowner association is developed, they have to submit plans, engineered drawings, explaining how things are going to function. Part of that process was submitting a plan with regard to these basins. And that's the plan that governs those basins. The master deed and bylaws that governs your association requires the association to maintain those. So really, the township has a couple of options. The township can simply sue the association for not maintaining the basins the way they were designed and the way in accordance with the plan that was approved when the development started. Instead, the association came to the township and asked the township to help. And so if the township is getting involved, the township can't violate the plans that were approved for this development. It has to restore, if the township's doing the work particularly, they have to restore what was approved 30 years ago. So they have to hire somebody, which is the engineers, to take a look at this plan and tell the township board what needs to be done. That all said, it doesn't sound like this board is opposed to revisiting this Basin 2 issue. It's just a matter of timing. And as Mr. Powell indicated, today's really establishing who's going to be part of it. And then the next phase is going to be the costs associated, which with Basin 2 included in the cost estimate, it will be an increased cost.
Thank you very much for the explanation, ma'am. But our problem, well, I'm sorry, kind of getting taken back a little bit. So the step 2 is to approve the boundaries. So step 3 is to actually approve the survey, but we're not approving it. The board is that correct?
Yeah, unless you guys want to do the work, which you're required to under the master deed, the township board is essentially taking responsibility. And so they would approve the plans, they would approve the contracts with the consultants, they would approve the bids that go out.
So our association does not have any say in what construction happens to our
The
neighborhood.
association has come to us to ask us to help.
The township is
I
never,
do understand that. We went through that last week in our HOA
the
meeting.
township is never foreclosed listening to the association and taking in feedback. But if the feedback is, let's violate the plan that was approved, that's not something that they can do.
Even when we can prove that the original plan that was approved was never there.
Well, Sean, you want to talk about amending a plan? I mean, there's a process, so we have to follow the processes. So as long as the processes are followed, if it requires amendment of those plans, then you'd have to follow the process to request an amendment of the plans and demonstrate. And if that gets approved, well, then construction can be in accordance with that.
And that would need a full engineering evaluation to today's standards, really, if you're going to amend it. I mean, your legal non-conforming status currently, and so if you're going to go, you're repairing it to the previous standards, then that's what Mr. Potter is talking about, then that's one thing. But if you're trying to come back and amend it, well, then we apply all of today's rules, which I don't believe they're going to want. They're going to want to restore it back to the way it was designed in 1991, was it?
And
I mean, that's my assessment.
If I could say, it's a little premature, because your question is, prove to us that it's broke. And we're saying it is broke, but we need to know how badly it's broken in order to define how much it's gonna cost and what work needs to be done. And now, Aaron and I, Mr. Potter and I could get very technical and say this could have been a wooded wetland and all they did is build a berm between this basin 2 and basin 1 that backs water up in a wooded wetland area. And maybe we can just raise the berm and the outlets, so we can get very detailed on that. But that's really the township engineer's issues, to come up with what would it take to put it back the way it was, and are there any alternatives to that that might be less disruptive than bulldozing a backyard of subdivision. All of those things will be done in the next phase when we get the engineer's report.
I'd like to make one last comment. So one thing you asked was, how do we prove that it had ever been done? And so we're talking about as-built plans, but I'd like to just explain exactly what an as-built plan is. So during the planning process for a development, the plans set goes through a series of reviews from what's called preliminary site planning all the way up through approved construction plans. And then when the project is completed, a plan set is submitted to the township called an as-built plan set. What that is essentially the approved construction plans with adjusted measurements as built. So when we talk about bringing this back to its original design, we are talking about bringing it back to the design as built. And those plans, when they're submitted back to the township, are certified by an engineer. And then they're reviewed by a township engineer typically. So there really is no question of what was built out there back in '91. We have the plan set that describes that in very good engineering detail. So it really won't be much of, this is very standard process for us to send an engineer out and do a survey and make a comparison of what's there now to what was built per the as-built plans.
And the as-built plans, is that just an itemized, or do you have photography?
No, it's a plan set.
That's all the questions I have, thank you.
Thank you. One last comment.
I just, no offense to you, sir, but if a tree doesn't affect the water drainage, and your only concern is leaves are gonna fall in a detention pond, and therefore we have to cut a tree down, I'd have a huge problem with that, because leaf removal is now gonna fall on a newly enlightened board that says we have to go in there annually and clean these things up. So leaves can be cleaned up. I'd hate to see trees come down, living trees, just because some leaves might fall in a detention pond. If the tree, if somebody, the engineer or somebody can prove to us that that tree and its root system is gonna affect the drainage from that pond, then I got no problem. But just to go in there and clear it out because it's gonna make it easier for everybody, I have a big problem.
I understand. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
William Thomas, I live at 8180 High Point Trail. I am the secretary on the board for Settlers Point. I apologize that our president and vice president were both unable to be here tonight. I want you to know that the board and most of the association appreciate everything you're doing. And anybody that wants to come over to my house and sit down and talk, I will try my best to explain what is going on. I don't think that any trees beyond the berm of the basins are going to be removed. There's no reason, so I can't imagine that those are included in the 20 trees. The 20 trees are all within the berms, and they're not going to affect the appearance from the backyard of any home. I have a letter here that was written by our Vice President, Rick Brown, and he asked me if I would read it for you tonight. Members of the Town Council, my name is Rick Brown. I am Vice President of Settlers Homeowners Association. Although the members have shown great support for this resolution, the overriding concern of the majority of the membership is the scope of this project as outlined by Johnson and Anderson, We are concerned on several fronts. The goal of this project is to return the basins to the original design intent going back to B.F. Thompson drawings dated 1990. We clearly acknowledge that Basin 1 is overgrown and that drainage outlet is in need of replacement. Basins 2 and 3 have been operating to the design intent, and we believe only moderate management of any overgrowth there is needed on number 2 and nothing on number 3, other than some minor recontouring of the culvert outlet. There has always been a very natural treed setting in the area in question, and we are concerned that elements of the scope of work take the renovation beyond the original intent of this project by clearing areas that are not germane to the proper functionality of the basins. I don't believe that's true. The homeowners are the stakeholders in this process, as we will bear the expense to bring this area to full operational condition. We are asking for a voice in the process. We would like to be able to understand and question the scope of work that will be defined for the proposal process to ensure that needless trees are not removed and that needless activities are not performed. We are asking that an association appointed representative be allowed to work along with J&A and the township to fully understand the hows and whys of this project in the interest of a complete understanding of scope. Understanding of scope and informational transparency for those that will be funding this project. We are hopeful that the bidding process will be an effective tool to ensure that the cost for the defined scope will be competitive and reasonable. Our goal is to ensure that the scope as defined for the bids is reasonable and fair, and the goal of returning this area to the full functionality while retaining the natural setting and keeping the costs to the minimum required to accomplish these objectives. We appreciate all the time and effort that Aaron Potter and Janine Smith have put into this project and the cooperation demonstrated in working with us. They have been very accessible and have taken the time required to meet and answer all of our questions. Rick Brown. I'd like you to know that there are 33 homes in the association. Presently, 29 have signed a petition with one dissenting vote. The other 4 I hope to have signed by tomorrow night. So the association is in favor of this SAD overwhelmingly. And as I said, we appreciate all that's been done for us and hope to work with you in the future.
Thank you. Just want to make something really clear. Understand it's not the intention of this board to look at this as a canvas type project where we're just going to go in and cut every tree. That's not the case. This is where this needs to be looked at, again, to repeat this again, needs to be looked at by the engineers to see how everything affects in this little system. And then those determinations will be taken and brought forth and decisions will be made. We don't want to cut any more trees down than we have to in this community. We've seen so many communities where the natural beauty is lost. One of the things that this board strives for all the time is to retain our natural beauty. But we do have a responsibility for certain systems that function. And, you know, this isn't the first one in the township or that I know of that over the years may not have been maintained at a level that it should have been. And unfortunately, it happens. But the fact that the subdivision group came to us and said, look, can you help us out here? We want to try to do this because we have a means and mechanism to do it economically versus everyone coming back and having to write one big fat check at a time to do all that. So, and that is through this special assessment district. So it kind of spreads it out over a period of time. So like I say, the first thing we want to do right now is just get to that point. Is there anybody else that has anything else they'd like to say? Okay, with that, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support.
Motion and support, all in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is now closed. Thank you. Okay, moving on to Item 9,
Supervisor,
yes.
I believe you still
Yeah.
have to approve the engineer.
Yeah, we-
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry.
And under discussion before we do that.
We're going to resolution. I wanted to go to resolution.
Okay, good.
Okay, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, all right.
There's nothing to approve under the.
You're right, thank you. I apologize. Go for it.
You should apologize.
I do.
I have a hammer.
So does my
That's
wife.
all right. I know. Okay. 9A, Resolution 18-039 is only to establish the SAD Settlers Point Stormwater Detention System Restoration. Mr. Powell.
Thank you. My first point is that I wanted to ask Janine, we have 33 homes in this subdivision, and I totally understand the position that an SAD is needed, because if they just handle it on their own, the association has to deal with all the costs, and there are other properties draining into that basin and really benefit by those basins being there. In the SAD notice and in the resolution, are those other homes included in it?
Yes, there's only 4 other homes, and yes, they are.
Okay, so by us establishing a special assessment district, we can by law incorporate them in the SAD,
They benefit from it.
and because they benefit from it. And I didn't know, did we receive any communication at all from them that they were opposed to this SAD?
We got 1 phone call today, that was it.
Okay, all right.
And
Also,
were they opposed or they were
They
opposed?
didn't want to have to pay for it.
yeah, there's a surprise.
Yeah.
Okay, then that being said, I wondered, and I apologize, Mr. Supervisor, I did not get a copy of the resolution. The treasurer allowed me to read it before I came in, but, and I don't know, it wasn't on, it's not on the,
Should be 9A, Mike.
That's what you have a
9A?
new copy of sitting in front of you.
There-
well, all this is the public notice, it's not the actual resolution itself. And so I don't have, I clicked on this zillions of times. Yep.
Resolution, I'm sorry.
Do you have this, Mike?
That's the exhibit to the
That's the
resolution.
exhibit, that's
You
not
have
the,
it?
that's not the, I have that.
Okay.
And it is here, but it wasn't, it's, what was emailed to me, it wasn't on
9B?
9,
9B.
I thought it was 9A.
9A.
No, 9A is establishing, 9B is the resolution.
Okay,
No, no.
I,
There you go.
9A is the resolution
Right.
establishing.
Correct, but he wants to read the resolution. It's located under 9B.
No, that's a
No.
separate resolution.
that's correct.
There's 3 resolutions.
So mine wasn't there, that's all I was saying, and I
Garbage.
just didn't know if everybody else got it. So, okay, thank you.
I beg your pardon. Yes, you are correct.
But I'm certainly ready to answer any questions and discuss
Fine,
it,
mine.
so I appreciate that.
I do have it here. so I can put it in.
But
I'm
doesn't
good.
the resolution set the public hearing with the date in it?
Yeah.
So they're gonna need that if they're gonna consider it today.
But we have it now.
Okay,
I've read it. and
Okay.
So it just didn't come
I beg your
in my email, that's all.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Roman.
This resolution 18-039, part of the heading says it is approving the estimates of costs.
Incorrect.
That is
Does that
incorrect.
make sense? Why would it say that?
it shouldn't.
So can I ask that that be stricken from the heading?
I hope so.
Well, I mean, it says approving the estimates of cost. It doesn't, you're not gonna assess anyone until the role is confirmed, and that doesn't happen until the next meeting. So I don't see a harm in approving the estimate of cost, because that's all you're doing.
Yeah, but the estimate in here is 0.
It's been revised.
If you look at the
Yes,
back of that revised copy.
Yeah,
back, I
it's
give
very-
you-
48. So this is part of the resolution?
Yeah.
That's an exhibit to the
To
resolution.
the resolution.
Resolution, yeah.
Okay. Who did this come from, Aaron or just Janine? Do you know if this includes the 7% township?
It's everything, yes.
It is? Do you know if it also includes, no,
Contingency?
contingencies? Does it include contingencies as well?
It would have been nice for us to have had the J&A
Spreadsheet on that.
spreadsheet, yeah.
Those costs are.
J&A.
Contingencies and legal.
Okay, I don't see the township fee. Oh, admin fee, 7%, so that is in there. I don't see a contingency.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I don't see contingency either.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think we would typically put a contingency in
Can you share that this direction too?
an SAD like this typically, if there was a cost overrun here, we would reassess.
The only problem is reassessing, it requires us to rehold public hearings.
Correct.
So that's,
If we're over 10%.
if we're over 10%.
The problem with the contingency is that we're holding on to their money for 10 years, and that may be returned to people that don't.
Well, this is premature of that. This is so I understand.
But it offsets.
Okay, so I am okay with the language then, since it's only an estimate.
Yeah, it's an
anyway.
estimate, basically, a guesstimate, I call it. On this type of thing. Okay, can I call further questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Lloyd.
I'm quite surprised I came tonight to basically approve this resolution with very little conversation about it. From what I had heard, that there was about 70% of the
Yeah.
people that were in favor of this, that there's no way that we can really establish what needs to be done until the engineers do it. Our problem is we don't have the resources to hire the engineer just to strictly go over there and give us a courtesy review of does this meet or not meet, or what needs to be done to restore it to its original. The biggest thing for me is the people are asking for this project to be done, and we're going to use township funds in order to finance this project. We are not really a bank, but we do have appropriate funds to be able to handle a situation like this. The other thing I wanted to mention to the board when we were off of the public comment is that for the board, when we hold public comment, it really is difficult to keep the record of a public comments open and closing when we have board members that and other consultants that are making answers to this other. We need to get back to the point of opening and closing public comment and then addressing those issues with the board and the township consultants.
A little bit of heat.
I'm really surprised the amount of time we spent on this tonight to move this forward, and luckily I believe in our process, so we're not really doing anything until next month by moving this along. But I'm going to reluctantly move this along based on my beliefs at this time that a majority of the people want us to see what we can do with this project. So.
Okay, Mr. Powell, if I remember correctly, last month when we talked about this, I think we put a cap on it at around $8,000 or something like that.
We did.
Yeah, this is going to go to 18.8 is what Johnson and Anderson's is. They have brought a $2,000 earnest money and deposited it with the township. I've been told that's at the moment what they can afford to bring into this. Should this go into, this is going to be remedied one way or the other. So ultimately, this cost would be levied back to this group. I would like to see if we can entertain a motion that would allow us to do the $16,800, and therefore with the $2,000 they have, that would cover the cost of the Johnson Anderson's engineering. They've made an earnest effort to try to come forward to try to do this, and I would really like to help them out and move it forward.
Yeah, if you recall last month, we wanted to allow J&A to start the survey ahead of time in order to get a 30 days head start on the project.
Correct.
Did they do the survey yet? Do you know?
No, you asked them to
Put some earnest money in.
put some earnest money down. They were not able to come up with $8,000, which was what you
Yeah.
recommended. So we haven't approved any of that to happen yet until we had this discussion tonight.
Couldn't remember all the dynamics.
Now, part of that discussion was that they were going to put that money into a deposit, and then once the SAD was created and they were assessed, that their original engineering deposit, I guess we were going to call it, would go back to them to go back into their operating ability. And I would like to, try to maintain that original intent if we can. Because, these folks, like I said, we've heard from 2 residents tonight that were opposed. For the most part,
I
these
don't think they were
people-
opposed, they just didn't have information.
Information.
Right.
Correct. So, No, these folks have come to us and asked us to do this. The language is pretty clear in the master deed. So, like Mr. Supervisor said, this is going to get levied back on them, as far as the engineering goes. So, I'd like to get it going as soon as
So
possible.
I think we really have two motions we have to deal with, authorizing J&A to proceed based upon their quote, and then, of course, the approval of the SAD boundary. And my response to all of this is that we hold the cards, that we're establishing an SAD. If the association at the last minute then decides to say, at the next public hearing, they say, it's too much, I'm sorry, we're not gonna go forward anymore, we can still assess the work that's been done so far, because quite frankly, they'll still be able to use it, and it'll still be valuable to them.
Right.
And so we're not charging any
It's
fees.
the township won't be
Right.
out of pocket.
Correct.
Well, I'm sorry, I have to pipe in.
Please.
The reason that what you're saying is true is because when you approved this at the last meeting, it was subject to an agreement to be established between the subdivision and the township to reimburse the cost, and authorizing the supervisor and the attorney to prepare such an agreement.
Okay.
And that's why, but in that case, at that time, it was authorizing the township engineer to provide the topographic survey and design development document phases of their proposal at a cost not to exceed $8,000 and subject to this agreement.
So you're saying that we have to incorporate any additional funds in the SAD motion?
No, you're really handling it separately. It's two different things. So you should handle the SAD separately. It's really, part of this is whether you're going to establish the SAD, yes or no, and then the other part of it is whether you're essentially going to front money by a private agreement, understanding the risks.
That agreement hasn't been drawn up yet.
Hasn't
No.
been drafted, no.
Isn't the master deed itself that agreement?
Pardon?
So the master deed in itself is not that agreement?
No, because we don't have to take responsibility for that master deed, they do. So this is an agreement between the township to front money, so.
And the benefit for the homeowners is they now have this plan going forward. They take the loss if the project doesn't move forward. The township doesn't use its township general funds to get the engineering done in a project that might not go forward. It's really putting the onus on the association who's responsible for the maintenance of the project.
Ms. Powell,
Ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
Mr. Supervisor, I move the resolution of the Township Board of the Charter Township of White Lake determining to undertake a stormwater detention basin restoration project and to establish and maintain a special assessment district to pay the costs associated therewith, and approving the estimate of costs from the township engineers. Therefore, Settlers Point Stormwater Detention Basin Restoration, Resolution 18-039, including the amendment handed out tonight, which establishes the estimate.
I have a motion, looking for support.
I'll support.
I had a question. You said establishes the estimate and the district?
In the district.
And thank you, and the district,
District.
because I didn't see if it was, yeah, it was actually on this exhibit as well, but Exhibit A, but yes, establish the district and the estimate.
Yeah, it's right there, the district.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
A motion, I have support from Mr. Lilly. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Second motion.
Second motion, Mr. Supervisor, is to approve the expenditure of up to $16,800.
How much was it? Was it more? 18,000?
It was 18.8. We would like to return their $2,000 back into their operating funds, if possible.
At this time, so you want us
Not
to
at
front
this time.
everything?
Like, we're gonna hold, we agreed, or you suggested last month that they would put this deposit an escrow with us. And then once we created the special assessment district, and they were assessed, then that would be returned to their operating budget.
But they, yeah,
So if we keep that and take that Johnson and Anderson's agreement and minus $2,000, then that's really going to handicap them to, over the winter months to be able to operate their neighborhood.
what you're assuming is that motion would not allow us to refund that back as part of the project cost? Is
So
what
that
you-
was your, the terminology you used, I believe, was a non-refundable deposit. But then in the discussion, you talked about at the end returning that back to them, so.
All right, then I'll make a motion to authorize the expenditure of it $18,800 to the township engineer to proceed with the proposed project to be eventually paid for in the special assessment district as an expense to the project.
And an agreement drawn up.
Thank you, and an agreement drawn up by the township attorney and authorize the township to sign that agreement, the township supervisor to sign that agreement.
I'll support that.
Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll get you going somewhere along the line here. You gotta take the first step. It's a little scary, but you gotta get the first step to figure out what's going on. The haircut may not be as bad as as you're thinking, okay? Understand that, really, this board, does not really wanna see all the trees cut down.
Thank you.
Pardon?
Going out on a limb for us, and we thank you.
Yeah, pardon the pun, yeah. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Item 9B, Resolution 18-038, confirm special reassessment role for the 2016-2020 residential rubbish removal. This is always a really trashy subject. So, this is gonna be a long night. For all of those of you who know that we have a single source trash carrier which saves our roads and which other communities are looking at. Matter of fact, I found out that Waterford is finally seriously considering going to a single hauler.
About time.
I mean, when you get half a dozen trash companies out there 5 days a week pounding the hell out of the streets, it's
Charging their residents twice what we pay.
yeah, I know, it's nuts. So I had some conversation with Gary Wall about it, and he's asked opinions of other people, and I think in the long run, they'll be good. But anyways, we've done that for some time now. And what this does is this allows us to assess a fee to the new homes that have come into the township. And if you want to take just a real quick look at it, and look at Exhibit A, take a look at the number of new addresses that we have added to our community. There are numerous. How many, Janine? Do you know offhand? Gotta be 40 or 50.
Couple pages.
Closer to 80.
80?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Be all on one page.
Well, that's just this page. Okay, yeah, it's about 80 of them, yeah. So that's a significant increase. So we have to, this is the process of which we have to prove it. Yes, Mr. Lilly.
Make a motion to approve Resolution
Want me to shut
038
up?
with the addition of the new parcels, as well as deleting a few of the parcels that had been demoed previously.
Very good. Have a motion, looking for support?
Support.
Motion support?
Under discussion?
Discussion?
Could I just ask what our cost is per residential?
Right now it's about $175. That goes up like $5 a year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
I
it
just,
is.
it wasn't in
Yeah,
this,
it's
and I just
cheap.
wanted to know.
Yeah, really cheap. Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, okay. 9C, Resolution 18-040, approve a non-union employee wage scale. It follows along with the, pretty much mimics the union agreement. Any questions on that? Mr. Lilly?
Make a motion to approve Resolution 040 with, which includes raises for the police chief, fire chief, and all the various non-union full-time and part-time employees.
Very good. Okay. Motion, looking for support?
Support.
Mr. Powell, support. All in favor?
Aye.
Old business. Second reading amendment to Chapter 26, Article 8 of the Section 26-239 of the Code of Ordinances, Youth Tobacco. Counselor, you and the chief have anything to add?
This is an ordinance that was presented last month as first reading. It really just takes the existing youth tobacco ordinance that's already on the books in the township and incorporates vapor products so that it's youth tobacco and vapor products.
Very good.
This is second reading. If you approve this, then it would be adopted.
I think any questions from the board?
Long overdue. I know what the other.
Overdue, and there was just a real quick one. I'll be very quick. There was a news story that showed that there on I think it was ABC News last night. There was a 40% increase in the last year and a half on vaping. Crazy. Okay, so we're looking for a motion to adopt the second reading. Mr. Bowman?
Motion to adopt the second reading amendment to Chapter 26, Article 8, Section 26-239 of the Code of Ordinances.
I'll support that.
Okay, we have motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Second reading amendment to Chapter 18, Article 2 of the Code of Ordinances, Fire Code.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd just like
Fire
to
Marshal John Holland.
make a quick comment. As the fire marshal, it is my job. I don't ride the trucks very often anymore. It's my job to monitor the safety and welfare of this community. It's really about community risk reduction. And with that said, I kind of look at the ordinances, I look at the existing fire code, I try to apply to this township and to the community, so it really works for us. Not everything in here is going to work for this community. And a lot of my decisions are based on complaints that come in. Anything that comes in a complaint, it's filtered up to me. And you know, really with my job, it's not to make popular decisions. It isn't. Popular decisions can have disastrous effects. It's to make the right decision. And you know, the right decision is never popular because it's the right thing to do. And I know that sounds kind of like a cliche, but I sometimes get some pushback with certain things. I just want to make sure everybody understands where I'm coming from. If I ignore certain things, you know, I'm everybody's hero till something bad happens. Then nobody's my friend anymore. Trust me. So I hope I sent this out many times. I apologize. There's a lot going on here. I know that. I added to it a few times. As we were waiting for a second reading, I said, "Well, there's one more thing here I want to put in here." I wanted to kind
Couldn't
of
leave it alone, could you?
I couldn't. I know. I apologize for that. So, does anybody have any questions? There were some concerns before. I made some changes. I was as creative as I possibly could be with this. So.
I noticed under the prohibited contents, you did clearly state out demolition debris, which was a concern. Large volumes of paper products, including cardboard or vegetation, that includes grass or brush materials. But when you also allow cardboard to be used in the ignition,
Yeah.
so it's not a prohibition, it's just a limitation.
What we want, the plan is open burning is recreational use. I don't want people burning and using their fire as a source of incineration. Because what happens is, a paper product, it stays it'll turn to ash, but the dimension of it stays intact. It gets caught in a thermal column, then it winds up on the neighbor's deck, a lot of it. And then again, that's where the complaints come from. So I'm trying to mitigate this, but yet not prohibit, burning itself. We are allowing the saw and lumber, so you can burn the saw and lumber. The way we're going to interpret that is, if the guys go out, if there's a construction project underway on that property, it's demolition debris, obviously. If there isn't, we don't want to discourage people from burning, sawing 2x4s that's been in your garage for a long time. You want to use them as kindling and burn them. That's not the intent of this. So.
We just wanted to make sure that was called out.
Yeah.
That's the minutia. Yeah. We were going to amend that to wood dowels too. It wasn't in there, but I guess we'll have to Mr. Roman.
I would like to make a motion to approve the second reading and amendment to Chapter 18, Article 2 of the Code of Ordinances, the Fire Code.
I have motion, look for support.
Or
Motion and support, all in favor, question?
Under discussion, just so
Discussion.
that the residents that might be watching or listening, let's say they have a small end table that they want to get rid of, or dresser drawers, or miscellaneous stuff around their house that they want to get rid of. How do they go about doing that in this township?
Put it on the curb, and GFI will haul it away.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get out on the record.
Which they're very
So-
good at. Bulk pickup, they're very good.
And if you have a demolition project or a construction project and you have excess material, how do you get rid of that if it's not large enough for a 40-yard dumpster?
Generally, if it's cut up in small enough pieces, about 2 foot long and stacked neatly or bundled together, it will be hauled away by GFI.
Okay, I just needed that on the record for the residents.
Small debris, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Motion support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, new business, Senior Advisory Council request for annual massage license. Mr. Lilly?
Mr. Supervisor, we have a lady, Stephanie Hobbs, that she's a masseuse, I guess is the right term. She does annual massages over at the Dublin Community Center for us, and as Senior Advisory Council has requested that we waive the fee. She is providing a good service for us in return, so I'll make a motion to waive that fee for the massage
Yeah.
person at Dublin.
$1 a minute. Yeah.
I'll
$1 a minute,
I'll
okay.
support that motion.
Motion support question, Mr. Roman.
We do this every year.
Every year.
Why don't you make it a 3-year waiver?
Our ordinance, I think. only
No,
does it on
can't
annual
do that.
massage
She
license.
reapplies for her license
License
every
every
year,
year.
so I'd rather do it annually.
Okay.
Motion support, all in favor?
Aye.
$1 a minute, Senior Center. Okay. I haven't had it done, but I guess I hear she does a good job. Yeah. Does a good job? Oh, I thought you said good, okay. Yeah, okay, there you go. Drumming up a little business for Kathy over there. Item 11B, Traffic Enforcement Agreement for Ivy Glen Park Homeowners Association. Is anybody here from Ivy Glen? Okay. Essentially what this allows us, well, Chief, I'm gonna let you get up there and do your thing.
Good evening. Ivy Glen's a new subdivision association, and through our PACT program with the police department, Sergeant Connell spoke to their executive board in reference to the private streets in Ivy Glen. They asked for suggestions. They said they would take any. Sergeant Connell spoke to me. I said there are traffic enforcement agreements between the township and subdivisions that are private that already exist. I gave him an example of one that I got from the township to give to them. With that, he signed it. I'm assuming the board president signed it, and he said he would be at this meeting. I'm not sure, maybe he forgot, asking for this to be sent to you, Mr. Colwell, for this board meeting.
Okay. So this will give you the tools in the box that you need.
So this will allow us to enforce the laws within that subdivision. It's a street. I don't know how much enforcement it will have in there, but yes, it'll give us those tools.
Okay, and this will, for the residents, this will be a common activity that we'll take as these new developments come in. The homeowners associations will come forth to us, and every time they do that, this will come before us, as well as, we'll have to, I believe we have to amend our,
It's the next
that's the
item.
next one, yeah, to amend our, or other article, I think it's Article 36, and amend that too, so.
If-
Hey, yes,
If I can just make a comment, there needs to be a slight modification to the traffic enforcement agreement to limit its applicability. Basically, this agreement says that the police department can enforce the entire traffic and vehicle code ordinance, but the authority doesn't extend to the snowmobiles, the off-road vehicles, and the Motor Carrier Act. So I would just want to amend this agreement to limit it to what the authority is, and that is the Michigan Vehicle Code and the Uniform Traffic Code. It's just a minor modification, but I noticed that the president has signed it, so we would have to just add those changes to it. It'd be a
Okay.
very minor modification to the agreement, but as long as the township board's in agreement with entering into an agreement, that specific language doesn't necessarily need to be approved.
I don't have a problem with that.
Another comment is we want to make sure that everyone understands that this does not give the police the authority nor the responsibility to enforce HOA rules. This is just traffic rules, not their own basic rules.
Yep, just the Michigan Vehicle Code and the Uniform Traffic Code. And you'll see on your next agenda item is that amendment, adding them for those purposes.
Thank you. Okay. Look- Yes, Mr. Lilly.
Make a motion to approve the agreement between the Ivy Glen subdivision and White Lake Township and authorize the supervisor to sign.
Have a motion, looking for support?
I have a question.
Question.
Don't you want that motion as amended, Jerry?
Yes. Thank you.
And I'll support as amended.
Support as amended. Motion, support, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. First reading of the amendment to Chapter 36, Article 2 of the Code of Ordinances Traffic Code, which reflects back to just what we're talking about now. We'll be adding this to the list of subdivisions. That'll be the sixth
If
one.
I can
I
speak.
have one
Please.
question.
Oh, yes.
On page 3, under Vision 3, Michigan Vehicle Code, do we also need to add them as number 6 there?
Yes.
Okay.
In each location throughout the ordinance.
No,
Yeah,
just,
we're missing them in one spot.
Okay, right.
so just a little refresher. I know we have maybe some new board members who aren't aware of how we used to handle these traffic code ordinances. White Lake Township has adopted essentially one ordinance that incorporates all of the traffic codes. So the Uniform Traffic Code, the Michigan Vehicle Code, the Motor Carrier Act, parts of the Natural Resource Environmental Protection Act that allows enforcement of snowmobiles and off-road vehicles into one ordinance. What has happened in the past is we adopt it and for example, we adopt the Michigan Vehicle Code as amended, meaning as future amendments are made to the code, we're just going to adopt them. And there have been challenges in the past that say you don't have the authority to adopt something that doesn't exist. So there's some mix of opinions on whether or not you do or not. So what we had done for a while there is every single year we'd bring it back to the board and have it approved again, just so that it secures that extra layer of protection so we don't even get those arguments that we have to battle. There haven't been very many changes at all, so it hasn't been brought to the board in several years. So we were bringing this to the board just to kind of readopt everything again so that it adds any new additional language from those codes. But it just so happens that Ivy Glen came forward and wanted to be added as well, and it was good timing to incorporate them into the traffic code ordinance. And as Liz points out, whoever drafted this added, you could see in a red line under the Uniform Traffic Code, added Ivy Glen Park, but omitted it under the Motor Vehicle Code, which is that Division 3. And so with those modifications, this would be ready to move to second reading.
I have a question of the counselor. We have a provision in here that actually requires or allows for imprisonment. And I didn't think our local ordinance, I didn't think that we wanted to get into imprisoning people. I thought we subjected them to fines, but not imprisonment. On township issues, if it's a state issue. So what you're saying is anything under 93 days, we can actually imprison residents for doing wrong under this law.
Yeah, the authority of local government is to prosecute misdemeanors up to a maximum of 93 days in jail and/or fine of up to $500, with the exception of the super drunk, which goes up to 180 days. And so, yeah, we've been prosecuting those. I mean, I could tell you every Tuesday I probably have a good 60 cases on my docket, and they're all misdemeanors for White Lake, that I'm your prosecutor.
Okay, and you represent the fact that some of them should go to jail for up to 93 days.
So me personally, every prosecutor is different. Me personally, I don't get involved in sentencing. I handle the pleas, I handle the negotiations of any plea bargainings, and then they deal with the judge for sentencing. I very rarely, in fact, I can't even tell you the last time where I offered an opinion one way or another about jail.
Okay. I didn't know that was a policy here in the township, and I appreciate that.
Okay, so we had a motion. So now I'm mixed up. You made the motion, correct?
We don't have a motion yet.
Oh, I beg your pardon, I am mixed up.
That's right.
Okay,
It has been amended today, though.
it has been amended. Okay, we have amended. Okay, so we are looking for a motion for the, let's see here. We're looking for, actually, we're moving it to the second reading, I beg your pardon. So, first reading, second reading, Article, Chapter 36, right, Article 2 of the Code of Ordinances, Traffic Code. Anybody want to make a suggestion to move on to second
Mr.
reading?
Supervisor?
Yes.
I move the amendment to Chapter 36, Article 2 of the Code of Ordinances, Traffic Code. I move it to second reading.
Very good.
As amended today.
As amended today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I need support on the move.
Support.
Support from Mr. Roman. All in favor?
Aye.
Moved on to second reading. Thank you. Item 11D, first reading of amendment to Chapter 24, Code of Ordinances, massage. Mr. Lilly.
Mr. Supervisor, as far as I know, the only change in that massage is to allow when we issue a license that is supposedly displayed by the applicant, it has the photo of that person on the license so that it can determine who that license belongs to.
If indeed that is the person, correct.
And we have had some issues that came recommended to.
I understand, that is what I see. Any questions from the board?
Making a motion to approve the massage change.
Okay, I have a motion, looking for support.
I'll support. Go ahead, Liz.
Support from Ms. Smith.
Is that moving it to second reading, guys?
Yeah, we're moving to second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Let's have it. First reading of the Pope rezoning. Mr. O'Neill, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm typing on the wrong keyboard because I have too many of them in front of me. Let me try this one. Okay. No. Okay. Tonight, you are considering the first reading of the rezoning of file number 18-026, which we call the Pope rezoning. You will be familiar with this property. It's just down the street. This is the old water softener business. If you look at the screen, and there's the home that's behind it. The old water softener building is currently zone local business, as is the auto zone right next door. And the proposal that Mr. Pope is bringing forward is to rezone the second parcel owned by the Cocken family to local business as well. So the Planning Commission considered this request and held a public hearing on December 6th. At that time, they recommended site plan approval unanimously, or I should say, I'm sorry, rezoning approval unanimously that would take this property from suburban farm to local business. And again, this parcel number is 12-21-276-020 and is also known as 7755 Highland Road. In the planning review, the finding after the review was that this request should be supported because the requested local business zoning district is consistent with the master plan and future land use map. Rezoning the parcel to local business is compatible with the character of the surrounding area. Rezoning the parcel to local business will not result in spot zoning, and conditions in the area have changed since the site was zoned suburban farm, which was done many years ago. Obviously, granting any rezoning of this parcel does not guarantee future site plan approval. That's a separate process that you're all aware of that they'll have to go through. And as a part of this process, they are required to give us some sort of a conceptual design. And again, I'm typing on the wrong keyboard. I will learn one day that there are two of them. And let's see, yep, this is right. And it's upside down. So you can see, and the AutoZone building on the right side of your screen is kind of a good comparison. the owner, Mr. Pope, or the future owner, Mr. Pope, intends to put a multi-tenant retail building in. He himself is a business owner and will take a portion of the building for his own business and then lease out the balance of the units. I don't know if Mr. Pope is here tonight. There he is in the back. And I don't know if he minds me saying so, but he's a property owner off of Elizabeth Lake Road now. He's just outgrown his facility. He had an interest in some land in the Elizabeth Lake Road corridor that it wasn't working out. But we began a process with him of going down a road of site plan approval. He's hired some competent architects to assist him and is really been great to work with. He's just in the middle of that process decided that he'd rather be on M59, and so he pulled the plug on that. And several weeks ago came in and asked to begin this process. So our staff and department concur with the findings of the Planning Commission and would also recommend rezoning this property from suburban farm to local business. This is only first reading, but I thought it was important to kind of go through those findings with you tonight. I also have, it's a little easier to see here. This is the home. As you can see, kind of tucked away. It's quite a wooded area there, but here's AutoZone, obviously M59. That's the old water softener. I call it the water softener business. So it'll basically mirror in size and shape the AutoZone parcel. And again, I'll flip back over to this layout. You can see the AutoZone parcel may go a little bit deeper off of M59, but they're kind of lining up their detention basin with the AutoZone basin. And there's a cross access that, there's a little bit of a grade differential, but there's a cross access that will be connected, so both these buildings will share the two driveways, one on each side. I mean, this is a concept. He's not held to this plan, but I think it's pretty straightforward, kind of what it's going to be. And Mr. Pope, I think, feels comfortable with this basic layout. So, if approved, we're going to get going on site plan approval with him. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, or for him, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them as well.
Okay, well, nice improvement to the corridor.
Sure, absolutely.
That's been the building's been around a long time.
I appreciate that, Mr. O'Neill, and then just during the site plan approval process, thank you for bringing it up that you'll be tying the driveways together.
Yes.
It'd be just as awesome if we could eliminate every single site having a hole that needs to be maintained in their backyard as a detention or retention basin.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know if you could put a little bug in their ears that they might combine forces and have one basin for the AutoZone and for this place to. It's much more efficient and certainly a less maintenance and all that stuff. So just as part of the site plan approval process.
We'll certainly consider it. Mr. Pope's very easy to work with, and I can pick up a phone and call him. AutoZone, who I have nothing against, is a little more difficult to get through the echelons that would need to be gotten through in order to get that decision, but it doesn't mean we can't or won't try, so I appreciate that.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Oh, Mr. Lee?
Make a motion to move file 18026, the Pope rezoning, to recommend a rezoning request from suburban farms to local business and move to second reading.
I have a motion, looking for support.
Support.
Motion support. All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to second reading. Thank you, Mr. Pope.
Sorry, who's supported?
Mr. Powell.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item F. This is a Michigan Economic Development Corporation grant with White Lake Township. Is anyone here from the Four Corners group? I'd like to have some discussion on this with my board members, so we can talk about this a little bit. Essentially, this particular property, as we know, has had some contamination issues and has a long history of contamination in one form or another. Back in 1988, the MDQ, or DNR at that time, I think it might have still been environmental, whatever it was back then when they had it released, but had a settlement on a lawsuit that had over $1 million paid into the cleanup fund. $1,140,000 or something like that. Oh, can't hear? Sorry. Excess of $1 million was paid into the fund to be used for cleanups. Over those years, there was some improvements done to a water main and a variety of other things in West Bloomfield, but there was absolutely nothing done to mitigate the problem at that site by the MDEQ. Okay. So a petition was put out to try to get some economic relief and contribution, in particular for the extra expense for the water main, the specialty gaskets, the soil removals, the soil testing, and a myriad of other things that had been done, and a few other things that may rear their ugly head. We don't know, you know, till it goes to the end. And this was a grant that I applied for through Senator Kowal's office also. And this money is to be used specifically for financial related to the economic costs of the environmental cleanup, period. If you have any questions on that, and you're just writing them down, I can see.
Yes, Mr. Supervisor, I really only have one, and that's, I want to make sure the township is not bound by something that is going to provide liability against the township. And one of the biggest clauses that I see in here is the termination clause, and it says this agreement shall terminate upon the earlier of the following, and it really, either side can cancel within after 30 days notice. So the process gets started, and the state of Michigan typically doesn't grant money up front. They typically reimburse. So the project continues forward, and an expense is accumulated due to the cleanup. And the state of Michigan all of a sudden says, we're giving you notice, 30 days from now, we're not going to fund anything. There's expense that has been maintained or accumulated, and now the state of Michigan, and I know we have to believe Michigan never does anything wrong, et cetera, but now the township that's going to sign this agreement, and it's going to be certainly subject to the next agreement as well, and I understand that, but there'll be other issues that I need to bring up then, is left holding the bag because the state of Michigan is no longer fronting or funding this cleanup, and I didn't know how we can protect ourselves a little bit more.
Well, if you look at the reasons in there for them to back out, and we spent some time going over with them, most of them are really not as applicable to us. That's number one. Number two, I can't guarantee anything.
Yeah.
Okay. There are no guarantees in life. But this is very common language in any of their grant forms.
Okay.
So they feel they have to have the ability to have the hammer to indeed make sure that you comply with what it is that you are intending to do.
So the next agreement really is going to be where we cover ourselves, and that's where I might have some other questions. So.
And council has crafted that agreement with the best interest of the township in mind.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yes, Mr. Roman.
I think the agreement with the MEDC, two different parts of that are termination and then default. Termination, my understanding, is if the state terminates the grant, then we're not going to give any money to the developer because it's not there. The default, however, would be a situation to where we actually give grant money to the developer, and then the state comes back after the fact and requires that money be paid back. And so that's my biggest concern, is we actually give money to the developer and then the state comes back and asks for it back. That's on page 6 under the default. And Terry, Rick, and I did discuss it a little bit. I originally thought that maybe we would ask the developer to put up a bond, some kind of a surety bond or a performance bond. And that's something that we can discuss further. I noticed there's no one here from Four Corners.
A little surprised, although I do know one of the principals was scheduled to go out of town for vacation on the holiday. I was under the impression that one of his associates was going to be here.
I did, for the record, I did provide all of the board members with an attorney-client privileged communication addressing both of these agreements.
Mr. Lowe.
I do have the same concern that Mike has. I think one of the agreements called that the township should furnish some type of liability insurance, and I would think, and I'm not a lawyer or a insurance man, but to think that would be pretty difficult to have liability insurance on a piece of property that we don't own. So I kind of agree with Mike in our discussions that we had, that maybe the issue of a bond or something as a protection to the township may be appropriate. The other part of that agreement that we're going to have to discuss is the agreement between the applicant and the township board. And I feel strongly that a representative of the company should have been here this evening to address questions, particularly those of the confidence that they have in being able to supply the township board with the documentation necessary to qualify for the reimbursement of those funds. The thing that really doesn't concern me too much, but is an issue, is the fact that I can't believe that out of this $250,000 that they probably have enough work that they've done already with the seals that we're putting in the sewer line and water lines, and the contamination, that they would have a difficulty even proving at this particular point that they're entitled to $250,000. But so looking at the agreements and looking at it over a period of years, I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think 1 or 2 years,
They'll have that.
if
yeah,
not
I agree.
immediately, they're going to be asking for these funds. So I don't think asking for some protection to the township in return for getting them $250 is should be a difficult thing to ask them to provide. Certainly not only to satisfy the board members, but we're dealing with township resources
Understand.
to deal with. So.
Mr. Roman.
Just a quick comment. So, in order for me to support this, I would require that the developer pay for all costs of indemnification that the MEDC requires.
If I can make a suggestion, I would incorporate some element of reaching out to your insurer, because part of the MEDC agreement is that you provide insurance. And if there's a way to do it, even though you don't own the property, I would recommend you do it so you're not in breach of the agreement with the MEDC, and require the developer then to reimburse the township for that insurance, if it's even possible to insure. And I don't know if anyone's called the insurance carrier at all yet.
I believe that we could be named as an additional insured on the developer's part. Township would be named as an additional insured. It would meet the criteria, but we just have to get that clear.
But that isn't specifically what MDEC asked for, so
We'll have to get it clarified.
MEDC.
Mr. Supervisor, because the developer isn't here today, I think it might be a good idea to table these motions. I don't know if I would need to put that in the form of a motion to table.
Or postpone?
Or postpone.
It's on the agenda, so it'd be appropriate to motion to postpone, and you can postpone to a date certain if you want to put it on the next agenda.
Can I make a motion to postpone indefinitely? Do I have to put down a date?
No, you don't.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Until the owner's representative.
So I'll just make the motion to postpone items 11F and 11G.
Till such time.
Mike, is your thinking that maybe the owner himself needs to make a request to the board to have these placed and be there?
I would think so.
So could your motion really include the fact that be postponed until such time as the applicant makes that request to have them placed?
I'll amend the motion up until some time that the applicant, well, we're the applicant, aren't we?
Well, there's.
Where the developer.
The developer.
Approaches the township.
To be placed on the agenda.
To be placed on the agenda. Thanks, Terry.
We have motion.
I'm only this.
He might as well second that.
Whatever works.
That, you may as well make the motion.
Right.
We have motion. Need support?
Support.
Support from Ms. Smith. All in favor?
Terry can support it. Terry.
I'll support it since they
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's have it. Okay. So we'll do a little more homework on that. Item H. What was the FYI?
Yeah, this is an FYI, Mr. Supervisor. I don't know whether everybody knows it or not, maybe not at this point, but the Independence Village on Union Lake Road is going to be sold. The applicant is evidently a huge outfit. They're asking the federal government to issue bonds in about $400 million. Bonds. We are part of one of those entities or townships that they want to purchase property in, so it's required that we advertise and hold a public hearing at the next meeting in order to qualify them to be able to ask for tax exempt bonds. Now, we can have the Paul Wygowski, our bonding attorney, if need be, will be here, or the applicant will be here, but there's no financial burden to the township, only that it holds a public hearing in regards to this purchase to qualify for the bonding. Just wanted to bring that up to the board, so if there's any questions between now and then, or any wishes that the board has for information, that you're provided with it.
So to what end, however, is the public hearing? So we're advertising a public hearing to be able to sell private property?
It's just to let the public know that the property is being sold to a huge outfit and they're requesting governmental bonds.
The governmental bonds are going to be used
in order to make these purchases.
It's a little different.
I think the governmental entity that's issuing the bonds would hold the public hearing, but.
Mike?
Yeah. All right.
Yes, Ms. Stefanik.
The name of the company that wants to buy it?
I don't have it listed with me right now.
We'll get all that. We'll get it figured out. But interesting.
Interesting, right.
Big business. The
Bet it is.
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate that. Now we're down to our trustee comments, and I'm going to mix things up a little bit this time around. Mr. Powell, I'm going to go first.
Boy, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to welcome the new recording secretary. Is this our permanent replacement for?
Yes, it is. This
Okay.
is Jennifer Edens.
Jennifer, welcome.
You
And
stole his
Jennifer
thunder.
has filled in for us before,
Sorry.
and Amy's absent, but
Yes.
she always does a great job for us, and I'd like to welcome her being here.
All right, thank you very much. And then I was told that the lawsuit hopefully has been settled with Huron Valley, and I appreciate that and everyone involved in that, Counselor. So I want to, before I wish everyone a Merry Christmas, I wanted to respond a little bit to Terry. During a public hearing process, I think for true transparency, I feel it's quite important for us to be able to respond to somebody especially in a public hearing for an SAD. There are questions asked. They can't even ask intelligent questions unless they're educated during the process. And so, for us to wait until they're totally done, they sit down, we close the public hearing, and now we try to answer their questions, and they're going to have more questions, and so we as a board have to come to some agreement whether or not we're going to allow that to happen or not. But I think it was perfectly valid for residents in a public hearing to ask questions and get answers during that process. So.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah. So that being said, I wish Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to the residents here in White Lake Township, and please have a safe holiday season and come back roaring to go next year.
Very good. Mr. Lilly.
I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. As everybody knows, that MTA is coming up quick, so we need to know who's going to need rooms and who's going, so we can get that taken care of. As all you know, that it's really difficult when we call in at 8 o'clock, because now every community that belongs to MTA does the same thing, so there's no secrecy anymore. So appreciate any heads up that you guys can give me. Thank you.
Very good. Andrea Voorhees.
I had in the last 30 days, I've had some good quality time. I say this in nice terms with the first responders of White Lake Township. I did a ride along with Officer Jeff Barber. White Lake is still pretty boring. We had maybe a half hour of excitement, and that was our basic tickets. But it was still an interesting couple hours. The second one was for my own personal use. I called and asked them to do a welfare check on my parents. Life is good with them, but as they were there, they also noticed a gas leak at my parents' house. They had just had gas installed 2 weeks prior, so it was like a double blessing in a sense that I asked them to do a welfare check because they transported my mom and they found the gas leak. Also, I actually did shop with a cop. Great. Thank you, Dan and Offers Kittle. Great experience. It was crazy. 2 hours of complete craziness at Walmart. And Meyer, great community partners. Seriously, every bit want to go back next year and just see the craziness of it. And then congratulations to the supervisor and the planning department for putting together a grant to the MDNR, which we were awarded $1.4 million, which will help acquire the Brundle Lake property on Elizabeth Lake Road for a future park. Yes, it's really nice. I haven't been down there in a few years, but it's a very nice, pristine area. And everyone have a great, safe holiday season.
Very good. Mr. Roman.
Just like to remind our residents, this coming Saturday at 8 a.m., we do the Goodfellas delivery. Anyone that's interested in helping deliver to needy families, we meet across the street at the community hall at 8 a.m. And I just want to wish our residents a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, be safe.
Yes. Okay, very good. Ms. Smith.
Okay. Quick library update. They're on schedule as they're building and scheduled to be closed in and drywall by the end of the year. So that's pretty exciting. Several of us had fun in the Pontiac Extravaganza Parade. That was a great way to start the beginning of the month in holiday spirit. And there was a great turnout and a wonderful parade. And I want to thank the police department and our maintenance man and Andrea and Mr. Coal for participating. That was a lot of fun. Next I want to mention, as Andrea reminded me, we were recently named the 16th safest city, I think, but we're really, township. I think we were ranked as city, so I'm glad your ride along was boring.
Yeah, so was I.
So that's something really to be proud of, and I don't know if everyone got a chance to read that recently, but that was announced this month. Next, I want to take a chance to talk about the tree lighting. It was a huge success. It was cold, so thank you for all of those that attended and bared the cold with us. I think every year we're like breaking crowds. Home Depot said that we were parked in their lot this year, and Walmart, and we completely filled the Fisk Farm parking lot. So it was wonderful. And I want to thank the police department for assisting and giving us a helping hand. They, for the first time, drove in Santa and Mrs. Claus, which was really fun for the kids. And the fire department is always wonderful help with the burn barrels and keeping the kiddos safe and cleaning up afterwards. So I want to thank them. I want to thank Greg Broney, former supervisor, for helping me in the event. A lot of people don't know, but it's just him and I that put it on, and it's a lot of work, and we spend hours at the farm, and we enjoy it, and it's a gift to the community, and I want to keep it that way. And so I want to thank Greg for his endless hours that he volunteers with me to put it on. I also want to thank the staff. For the first time, it was our 10th annual event, and the first time we had staff volunteers come, and I really want to thank them. And I want to thank Mr. Potter for his leadership, because he decided to volunteer and his whole department volunteered. So, I mean, that was wonderful. And we thank, I want to thank Kathy Droscher in the clerk's office for helping. I mean, we had great representation out of all departments, and we had Reva from the treasurer department and Kelly from the supervisor's department. So I really want to thank the staff. That was huge. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. That really meant something, that we had full participation in the event. I also want to thank Elaine in the accounting department. We couldn't do it without her. She keeps everything straight for the event. I want to make sure we thank the library and the Friends of the Library. They have the fun task of bringing all the gingerbread houses over from the library, and it's hard to make them all in one piece. And it was our biggest gingerbread house contest of the year, ever. I think we had 23, right? 23. We've never had such a big contest, so that was really fun. So it's a great event, and we were able to do some new things this year with wonderful sponsorship. We added a fire juggler and a fire twirler. We had a horse derby. We had characters walking around, which was really fun for the kids. So every year we're able to add new things because of sponsorship. So thank you to all the sponsors. What else? I had also tons of fun with Shop with the Cop. Andrea and I were wrapping partners, and that was a great time. It's really wonderful to see what the kids pick out. They're so incredibly thoughtful. And it's also funny, like I had to wrap a goldfish. So, I mean, so it's a fun night. So I encourage you all to come next year. And I want to thank the Optimist Club for helping and wrapping as well. Most of us had a wonderful time at the Senior Center Luncheon at Dublin today. And I want to thank Dave and Amy's. It was nice to have a local caterer. It was delicious. So, and it was an enjoyable afternoon with my colleagues, so thank you. I did want to take a chance to clarify the grant. I've been hearing from some residents a little bit of confusion that they think it's something to do with the Civic Center. It's just the park. We're just using that grant money to develop the park. So I just wanted to get that out there and clarify that. And Goodfellows, we did collect canned goods at the tree lighting, so all of those are going to the Goodfellows for this weekend. And I think I covered everything. It was a fun and busy month for White Lake. We had a lot going on. So I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a very safe New Year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Well, most of you noticed, if you haven't, you're not paying attention. If you're not paying attention, you got no business driving down M59. We have a new sign.
Yeah.
And as we're figuring out how to use it, which is a little complex, but we'll get there, we're going to put bits and pieces of information up there. And of course, it does say Merry Christmas a couple times. And it says Happy New Year, and it said Happy Hanukkah. And so we're kind of going through all the letters, kind of using the boards and trying to figure it all out. And it definitely has been noticed. We've had other communities actually ask us where we got it. And I will tell you that the board was very gracious to entertain the idea when I brought it forward. I asked for a budget of around $50,000 to do it. I delivered a sign for $38,000 and about another $4,000 in electrical work, which, because this whole radio building, we won't go there. It wouldn't have been that if we'd have had an actual circuit to tie into, but we had to get a little creative. So we were able to bring it in considerably under budget.
Awesome.
And bought not the Cadillac, but we bought the higher end Buick. So it'll serve us well for many years to come. And it's a local company, and it's not made in China. So that's a good thing there. The newsletter, as you had mentioned, is going to come out. We're going to do that twice a year and utilize our tax mailing. There is a considerable savings to the public because it costs only $1,420 to stuff that into the envelope versus trying to do a separate piece of paper, publication. Just the mailing alone would get us. So we're trying to save a few bucks. I got to commend Dan and the crew for the Shop with the Cop. I know it's come up a couple different times, but I'll tell you what, if you truly want to be moved, it's something that you need to see, okay, and to watch these kids light up, because so some of these kids, it really makes a difference between them having a holiday and not having a holiday. So 75 kids, so huge difference. I'd like to thank Kathy Gordonier for all her work that she does at the Senior Center, and it was a nice luncheon. It was an exceptional luncheon today, and we had a good time doing that, and it was very well attended. It was a heck of a time.
It was a beautiful day to get out.
Heck of a time to find a place in the parking spot today. And the grant, that's a culmination of a lot of work and a lot of time. We still have some work to do yet. We'll find out more as things unravel in the process. It was $1,372,000, I think, is what we received. And I will tell you, I will equate that morning in Lansing, sitting in front of that board, to being in the delivery room with my wife. It was nerve-wracking as all hell, okay, because they would put things up on the board and they would shuffle them around, and then they would sit there and say anything on the Iron Bell Trail gets priority, and all of a sudden we went from 5th place down to 12th place, and it was like, what's going on? And it was just this shuffle, 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 shuffle. And then they had a couple breaks, and I was like twitching, and in the end it worked out, and then there was talk about cutting some of the grants. And actually, I was very, very impressed with the way that the Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund Board conducted that meeting, how they fund the money, and how they genuinely, each one of those people, I mean, these people really care. I will tell you that I got the impression that their whole thing is let's get that money out there, let's do something that we can do. And there was one project there somewhere, I'm going to say it's something Cherry Beach, so I'm presuming in Antrim County, or somewhere up in the Traverse City area, where they wanted to buy like 350 feet of Lake Michigan.
I think it was a park near Grand Rapids, Grand Haven. I think it was. I'll think of the name if you give me too long.
Yeah, but they wanted $4 million to buy
Hoffmaster State Park.
They wanted $4 million to buy under 400 feet of beach.
Wow.
And no one was there. No one showed up from the community, and they didn't get the grant. It was set aside. So it doesn't mean they won't qualify in another year, but it was very interesting. So it was an interesting process. I'm glad we went through it. We are going to, as we go through this, we're going to do the planning department and myself and Parks and Rec. We'll be working on a master plan for the park, and then we are going to go in for some development grants and move forward and put some trails and create some nice amenities for years to come.
Great.
So, all that, Merry Christmas to all. Thank you so much for coming. God bless everyone. God bless America. Thanks for our troops out there that are protecting this country and making it safe. And good night. I need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Motion and support. Motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
Oh, 9 o'clock.